I've said that we learn the basics of our adult behaviour, the foundations of our adult behaviour, predominantly before the age of 2. And in the last part, in part 2, we looked at emotional learning, how we respond, how we behave emotionally, and how perfectly we've got that organised by the time we're 2 years of age. Now, and I've also talked about the connection with self-esteem, about feeling okay, about communicating. To communicate assertively, you need to feel all right about yourself. You need to feel that you're worthwhile, valuable, lovable. And to get into healthy relationships and have those established, you need to be able to feel good about yourself. So self-esteem is the next issue to be looked at. Why and how do we learn particular self-images and worldviews? Where does that learning come from? Now, as I say, I can't stress enough that I believe we learn the basics of our worldview at a very early age. And we learn whether we're lovable, valuable or not, and how other people will see us and our position in this world, our place in the world. We learn by predominantly how people interact with us. Whether we are interacted with in a positive, loving way or in a negative way. And the self-esteem, which is very basic to how we then can operate in the world. That is one of our most basic skills, our self-esteem. Our basic, what's in the toolkit for life. We learn our self-esteem predominantly from how many positive interactions we get from people that make us feel good or negative interactions with people that make us feel bad. And so I have learnt to look at self-esteem as similar to a bank balance, with positive and negative input. The positive interaction is anything that is done to you physically or verbally, anything that's said or done that makes you feel good. And the negative interaction is anything that's said or done to you that makes you feel bad. These can be, as I say, physical or verbal. There are 2 types of positives and negatives. There's conditional positives and negatives and unconditional positives and negatives. A conditional positive interaction is something that is said or done to you, and particularly, say, adult to child, an interaction that makes you feel good, that gives you the message that you are a lovable, valuable person. So, a conditional positive, say, from adult to child, may be something like, here's a hug because you picked up all your toys and put them in the toy box for me. I'm really proud of you kids for being able to pick up the kitten gently today because we had to talk about it yesterday when you picked it up by the tail, and you've done really well today. That new outfit that Grandma sent you for Christmas looks terrific on you. These are, I like you because messages. There is a condition or a reason. A physical or verbal message that says, I like you because of something or other, right, is a conditional positive. There's a condition or a reason. So, I'm really proud of you for picking the kitten up gently. I like you because. You've been really great picking up your toys. I'm really, that was great help for me. I like you because. You kids were great at the supermarket today with me and really helped me when I was in a hurry, and I'm going to buy you a special Milky Bar each. I like you because message. So the conditional positive interaction is anything you say or do that gives the message, I like you because of something or other. It can be adult to child, as we've just looked at, or it can be adult to adult. A conditional positive interaction adult to adult, I like you because, might be something like, that was a terrific report, you've done that really well. I really feel safe driving in the car with you, you're a great driver. That was a great conversation we had last night, that was really helpful. This is a fabulous meal, you're a great cook. I really like that new outfit on you. These are I like you because messages. You've done a terrific job with the landscaping in the garden. That looks really great. That was a terrific idea. These are I like you because messages. Whether they are adult to adult messages or adult to child messages, for each one of them, in terms of your bank balance of your self-esteem that's developing here, you deposit 50 points. They are worth 50 points for each interaction. An unconditional positive interaction is anything you say or do that gives the message, you're just fabulous, I love you, you're terrific, hug. There's no because, there's no reason, there's no condition. It is completely unconditional. An unconditional interaction, either adult-child or adult to adult, is twice as valuable to us, and you can deposit 100 points for each one. Twice as valuable. A conditional negative interaction is anything you say or do that gives the message, I don't like you because you are not a valuable, lovable person. You are a horrible, ugly, whatever, stupid, inadequate. Anything that gives a negative message that is either physical or verbally communicated. I don't like you because. So, you are a bad, stupid, awful, rejectable person because of something or other. So with a little child, adult to child, here's a smack because you didn't pick up your toys when I told you to. You're a dickhead if you can't do that puzzle. Your brother could do it when he was half your age. I've just put clean clothes on you and you're a complete mess already. You can never keep yourself clean. Your kids are not watching any television for the rest of the week because you haven't picked up your toys in the garden and somebody's going to fall over them. You never listen to anything I say. So it's the criticisms, the put-downs, etc. that are the conditional negatives. I don't like you because message. Adult to adult conditional negatives are things like, I'm not eating this rubbish, why don't you learn to cook? Everything you say is stupid. God, what have you done with your hair? Why don't you, get some decent clothes? You can never keep yourself looking tidy. You're always late. I wouldn't go anywhere in the car with you, you're such a bad driver. Right, so it's the criticisms, the put-downs, the conditional negatives. The message is, I don't like you because. For each one of those, you withdraw 200 points. Now this is the problem that, as you can see developing here, the relative value of negatives is enormous. The unconditional negative interaction is anything that you do or say that gives you the message, I hate you, just get out, just leave me alone. There is no because, there's no reason, I just want you out, I hate you, I don't care about you, not because of anything. So the adult to child relationship or the adult to adult relationship where there is abuse of a psychological, physical or sexual nature, those people are experiencing unconditional negatives for each interaction. And for each one, they are worth minus 1,000 points. We as a culture have empowered negatives. We focus on negatives. We as a culture do not communicate, generally speaking, we don't communicate positives. We find it very difficult as a culture to communicate high regard for people, to recognise when other people have done something well. And that usually arises out of a sense of not feeling good enough about ourselves in the first place. So we don't communicate these positives. We generally operate in our culture there. We usually are noticed only when we get it wrong. So we get, generally speaking, communication from the conditional negative point. I don't like you because of something or other. You've done that wrong again. I'm sick of having to tell you about that. Will you please stop cooking my toast so brown. You know I hate it. Now, the point is that if we then look at our bank balance here that's developing, and that's our break-even line on our bank balance. The more positives, both conditional and unconditional, we have had, particularly at a very young age, which I'll talk about a bit more in a moment, the more of those positives we've had, the higher above naught our self-esteem goes. The higher above naught our self-esteem goes, our balance, bank balance goes, the more we believe it becomes a world view about ourselves that we are lovable, valuable people who deserve to be happy, healthy, successful, safe, loved, respected, nurtured, honoured. The more that becomes our belief, our world view, the more we then choose around us jobs, friends, relationships, activities, lifestyles, hobbies and so on, that promote that positive view. So if you've had lots of positives by the time you're 5 years of age, you go to school, you're feeling good about yourself. You expect to get on well with the teacher, you expect to be able to learn easily, you expect to make good friends in and be able to have safe games in the schoolyard. You're beginning to see yourself as successful, and the more success you have, the more you believe you deserve it, the more it happens. So this becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy here. You expect to be involved in the right sort of positive activities. The more success you have, the more you feel good about yourself, the more you believe you should have. The opposite is true. The more of these negatives, both conditional and unconditional negatives you've had, particularly 0 to 2 years of age when this foundation is being laid. Remembering, of course, that none of us have any power or control over what happens to us 0 to 2 years of age. So we are all powerless, sitting ducks basically, and survivors of the luck of the draw here, that if you are unlucky enough to have had lots of negatives 0 to 2 years of age, your self-esteem is going down the chute. The more of those negatives that you've had, the further under 0 your self-esteem goes. The further down it goes, the more dangerous and self-defeating your behaviour becomes. So, if you've had lots of negatives, your self-esteem is such that you believe that you are not a lovable, valuable person who deserves to be happy, healthy, successful, safe, loved, nurtured, respected, honoured. The more you believe that you don't deserve that, the more you then begin to choose around you jobs, friends, relationships, activities, lifestyles, hobbies that promote that high risk, unsafe, unsuccessful, unhappy life. So, if we look at this position here, just under 0, you know, that's probably most of us, you know, where you see workaholics, you see depression, anxiety, generally not feeling good about life, generally unhappy, not feeling fulfilled, not feeling like you can get what you need out of life. A bit further down, it becomes more dangerous. This is the point at which you find drug and alcohol abuse appearing, which is emotional pain killing. Emotional pain killing that has to be directly related to the amount of emotional pain. The bigger the wound here that we were talking about in part 2, the bigger the emotional wound, the bigger the emotional painkiller needs to be. So that when people are in extreme emotional pain, they are looking for an emotional painkiller. And drug and alcohol abuse is one of those forms of emotional pain killing. A bit further down, criminal behaviour and delinquent behaviour appears, which is of course much more personally dangerous than any of these others in terms of the likelihood to end up in prison, which is once then taking over your freedom. bit further down, we get into psychotic illnesses, mental illnesses, or serious personality disorders. And at the bottom here, the most extreme form is homicidal and suicidal behaviour. So it becomes increasingly more dangerous the more of these you've experienced, particularly in early childhood. Now, the thing is that although workaholism can appear there, it can actually be bad enough to become homicidal or suicidal. You can decide that you're much too busy to worry about your car, much too busy at work, much too busy to go to the doctor because you've got, you know, a lump suddenly appeared somewhere. No, I won't worry about it. Car can't be serviced, so the brakes fail and you kill yourself or somebody else. You are not taking care of yourself. You're always available, always doing things for other people, always trying to do more and more and more for everyone else and not take care of yourself. It can, drug and alcohol abuse can appear at that level but can go down to the most extreme forms. Criminal behaviour likewise, psychotic behaviour likewise. Now, the good news is that like any other bank balance, once you start depositing the positives, you can begin to bring that balance back up into the black instead of down here in the red. So obviously the younger you start changing this, the quicker you can bring the bank balance back above naught. So people in their teens and children can change their self-esteem and these early dysfunctional messages much quicker than can adults. People in their 20s and 30s can change this much quicker than people in their 40s and 50s. It takes more time because the more self-fulfilling prophecy there is downwards, the more lack of success you have, the more failure you have as you go through your adult life, the less you believe that you're likely to get anything else. So it escalates downwards as adults, and the quicker we start trying to get in and sort these problems out, these negative, dangerous messages, the earlier we do that, the better. But it is the case that at whatever point you start, you can change this process. You can, once you realise what the messages were, what the damage was, you can then start working with the positives. That usually requires therapy if it's extreme, if it's serious. Now, I have said that we operate here with the conditional negative. Our culture has been set up to respond to failure. We usually only get noticed when we do it wrong. And this tracks through every major institution and scenario that we're likely to be in, starting with the family. The average 2-year-old does probably a couple of hundred things really well every day. You know, they didn't. There was a pair of scissors on the table and they didn't give themselves a haircut. That was terrific. There was, you know, they picked up the kitten very gently today. They got up on the stool next to you and tried to help you do the dishes. They tidied up some of their toys. You know, they tried to share their sandwich with their doll. They're doing all of these wonderful things every day and we don't notice them. They do 10 things wrong every day, perhaps. And we're straight onto them. You've done this again, you've left that there, I'm sick of this, you're making too much noise, you're a nuisance because you're a stupid child, whack. We're doing these sorts of things and communicating only the negatives. So the message the child gets is, everything I do is wrong. Because although we need to communicate the negative things that they have done in a fair and reasonable way, that's fine if we've done it in an environment where there's 200 or 300 conditional positives already there, and a good handful of unconditional positives as well. That's fine, because their self-esteem is already up here. And they're going to be fine, with fair and reasonable boundaries. They may not play on the freeway. So that's a fair and reasonable boundary that needs to be put in. They must learn that. But in an environment where they feel good about themselves anyway, that they will receive those fair and reasonable, non-abusively communicated messages, they'll receive those quite easily. So it starts with parenting. We learn almost routinely in our culture that everything we do is wrong from our parents. Secondly, these people then go off to school at the age of 5, and the school chips in with, I got 9 out of 10 for my test, and the teacher says, what happened to this one? Not, that's fantastic, you've done, you know, it's just brilliant what you've done. But, okay, what went wrong here? So the education system chips in with focusing on failure, although there's a lot of things changing about the education system, particularly with the younger children. They're focusing on positives a lot more. Then the church comes in, where according to Christianity, we have been born rejectable sinners. Now, nothing could be more ridiculous. The newborn is in fact perfect. But if you have had various rigid religious upbringings, you will be programmed to believe that you are born a sinner and that you are by nature wicked. And I have very distressing stories from my Catholic clients, for instance, telling me of heartbreaking stories. At the age of 7, being lined up outside the confessional, trying to think of something awful to say about themselves because they'd been really good this week. And it is not okay to go in and say, you know, I'm really proud of myself, I've done well this week, because pride is one of the 7 deadly sins. So religion has a lot to answer for in terms of our low self-esteem of all sorts right throughout the world. But certainly based on a Western Christian culture, we've got a lot of issues around guilt and shame that arises from religion. So we get that message from religion. We get the entire legal system hooks in and only recognises us when we get it wrong. You do not get letters from the police saying, congratulations, we photographed you every week for the last, you know, few months driving through Greensborough at 62 kilometres. Well done. And you can drive for years and have absolutely no problem whatsoever. And one day when they've got you, you're a really wicked person and we're going to do this and we're going to take points and we're going to take money and you're a really bad person, and the message, you know, over the media from the police is you lot are all so wicked and evil and we're going to have to, you know, and you're all bad drivers and you're this and you're that. Now, in fact, when you look at the facts of the road, the problems of driving and so on, we're doing a bloody good job. The fact that we can drive half a tonne of metal anywhere at 60 kilometres without killing ourselves or anyone else is really great. But the fact that we can drive from here to Melbourne and back over and over and over and over again without killing anyone or ourselves is fantastic. In a city the size of Melbourne, for instance, we are doing a miraculously good job that we are cooperating to the extent where there are only 3 or 4 major road accidents a day, when you consider the trillion, billion, million interactions that happen on the road every day. But the message we get is negative, 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 negative. So the law, as one of our major institutions, hooks in with that. And then lastly, of course, we have the media, who give us 29.5 minutes every day of news that is war, mayhem, disaster, scandal, wickedness, you know, disaster, all the negatives you could possibly imagine. And half a minute of the new chimp at the zoo. So the message is that everything's, you know, gone down the chute. Everything is awful at all times, is the message that we are being constantly programmed with. Now, we have then workplaces, we have friends, social events, we have community events, we have family events where the negatives become the centrepiece of activity, where there could be in that environment 200 or 300 things right. The few things that are wrong are the things that we empower and communicate. So what we've got to learn is how to start communicating the positives. And until we feel okay about that within ourselves, we're unlikely to be able to do that. As I said, we learn this worldview, this general behaviour at a very early age. And I believe, from what I have seen therapeutically working with people, that in fact there is an enormous, potent impact of interactions that happen from birth to 6 months of age. And I will explain more of this. If the pregnancy itself is greeted with pride, enthusiasm, happiness, excitement, joy, there is already a sense, I believe, that goes through to the fetus that, this is pretty good, people are pretty pleased, that I'm here and, life's going to be pretty good for me. They are doing experimental interactions with 7-month-old fetuses in utero, playing with them these days. And certainly fetuses born at anything from, 25 weeks onwards are surviving. So there is some receiving of information there that is happening. So the fetus is already getting the message that life is pretty good, I'm welcome, everyone's pretty pleased with me, and then that person is born and is in its cot signalling a need. Infants cannot speak, they cannot move, but get up and walk around, I mean. So they can't go and get themselves a glass of water if they want to. If they're too hot or too cold, they can't tell you that. They must signal in order to survive. So they are signalling by crying that they have a need. And the need might be that they're hot, cold, tired, bored, frightened, in pain, lonely, wet, hungry, pooey, whatever it might be. They must communicate that need, and the only way they can do that is by getting attention. They are born to do that. And that signalling, the crying, is responded to by somebody coming in, finding out what the problem is. This child has got very upset, and they're crying and crying, and they're tucked in too tight, and they've got too hot. So you take them out, you cool them down gently, and they still keep crying, and you find, that's not the real problem. The real problem is that the booty's been tied on too tight and it's really hurting them. So you undo that, the child calms down, they cool down at their speed. When the child is ready, it returns to its cot. Now that interaction teaches the child enormous amounts. It teaches the child, firstly, I'm okay, I'm loved and valued, I am a valuable person here. It is okay and safe for me to have needs. It is okay and safe for me to communicate my needs, to ask other people. I can trust authority figures and other people generally. The world is a welcoming place for me, and I am a loved and valued member of this world that I am confronted with. And from that point, almost from birth, I am being programmed to succeed in life. Now the opposite is true. If the pregnancy is greeted with shame, hostility, burnout, fear, guilt, jealousy, resentment, anger, whatever it might be around the pregnancy itself, already the messages are going through to the fetus that, well, life's not too good here for me. I'm not wanted. I'm a nuisance. People are angry about me being around. There's a sense of, this isn't going to be too good. That person is then born, is laying in its cot, communicating a need by crying. Once again signalling that they are hot, cold, tired, bored, frightened, in pain, lonely, hot, wet, pooey, hungry, whatever it might be, signalling the need. And nothing happens. The door stays shut. Nobody is going to go to this kid. It's just crying because it's spoiled, and it should be laying in its cot, crying in any way that's good for its lungs, as happened to many of our generation when we were younger, when we were infants. So the door stays shut, and this child then begins to experience severe pain because of nappy rash or cold. They're in a hot day with a fan on, and they've wet themselves, and it's like being in a cool safe. They just get colder and colder. And they're signalling a need. Nobody's tuned in. Or somebody comes in, and they're very angry. And I just want you to shut up. I've had enough of this. I just don't want to hear this. I'm too busy. You're always screaming. You're always this, that or the other. And I'm sick of it. And shake the child, or in some cases put a pillow over the head of the child to shut them up. Now the message very clearly is given to that child, I'm not okay, I am not loved, I am not a welcome member here of this world. It is not safe or okay for me to have needs. It is not safe or okay for me to communicate those needs and ask for somebody to help me. I cannot trust others, and particularly authority figures. The world is not a safe and welcoming place for me, and I'm being programmed to fail from birth. There can be, in addition to that, accidental forms of what I call accidental abuse, where, for instance, a child might be born with, say, severe eczema, and the expert, the doctor, says to the very willing parents, when you take this child home, don't touch it, because you'll make the eczema worse. So the parents, wanting to do the right thing, take the infant home and don't touch it. And the doctor has also said, it's very dangerous for this child to scratch themselves, so put mittens on the child. And when they go to sleep at night, tie their hands down. Now, I've had clients that this has happened to. Now, the parent's doing what they're instructed to do. They're doing the best possible job that they can, and yet the child is experiencing what can be only described as probably feeling like torture. Any one of us would experience that as torture. And the child then, of course, is signalling a need, and the parents don't do anything about it. Now, the child hasn't got the adult wisdom to work out what the problem is here. The child grows up unable to bond with anyone. This is a person who is extremely depressed as an adult, who is extremely unable to connect with people. And everyone says, well, you know, why? There was no abuse in this family. It was a really good, happy environment. So it's a task to sort of like a detective story to work out what might be the link here. What might that early world view have been for that person? And similarly, one of the things that I find most alarming is the notion of we would not take in an adult male, lay them out on a table and with no anaesthetic, cut the top of their penis off. And yet we do that with infants routinely. Now, on the assumption that we forget that as infants we all forget what's happened to us. It's irrelevant. I have found through working with people who've suffered severe trauma that in fact the body holds memories that go back a great distance, and in many cases early childhood abuse is in fact there programmed in on the database and begins to form the worldview. And if nothing is done to change that, then that stays what the foundation of the worldview. Any of these negatives, for instance, can be changed. But if we're not told as parents, or if we don't know in our culture the impact of this, that this has on infants, then we don't do anything about it. And then the wheels keep just falling off the cart more and more as the time goes by, as the years go by.
Yeah, can you be badly affected by certain people, even though your self-esteem is generally healthy?
Yes, certainly, but yes, absolutely, because in fact, if you get lots of positive messages from grandma and auntie and, you know, whatever, and then you go to school and you have a teacher who treats you very, very badly, then you are likely to see it as just that person having a problem, and you'll have interaction problems with that person, but you won't see the whole world as a problem. The child, for instance, who's being brought up in, say, an abusive family, who has an experience of somebody else outside the family who really respects and loves them and likes them, will have a different worldview as well. For instance, I have clients who tell me nobody in their family gave them any positives at all, but when they were in grade 7, they had a teacher who thought they were terrific and they took a lot of time with them. So they've got a light at the end of the tunnel. They know that not everyone is like this. But where in part 1 we were talking about the trapped circle, if you are completely trapped and isolated from no other positive input, then that becomes your worldview. You can't see anything else outside that.
From what you've said, Children get powerful messages from negatives. How do children react to subtle or indirect negatives?
70% of our communication is non-verbal. So only 30% of it depends on what we're saying. So if I say, I'm not angry, you know, it's very clear what I mean.
It wasn't that clear.
Yeah. So if there is a subtle message, my sense is that most people will pick up what the real message is, non-verbal. Oh yes, absolutely. Children are very good at picking up non-verbal messages. So we've looked at how the self-esteem develops, and the message is we need to communicate positives. We need to have fair and reasonable boundaries about negative things that are non-abusively communicated, but we need, as a culture, as parents, as friends, as partners, as workers, to communicate positives.